I wanted to keep going because we only got about 20 minutes or so left before we've got to end the meeting, but I just wanted to demonstrate that it is patently false that these other parts of philosophy are irrelevant to governing. They're absolutely crucial to governing if the end game of governing is to make sure that individuals are free. And that is the purpose of a government. Not the purpose of what we've got out there, but the purpose of a real government, the thing that we want to have. Earlier on, there was a discussion about, where would the conservatives fit in? Where would the liberals fit in, and et cetera, in this hierarchy. This whole day has been about hierarchy of philosophy, and I don't know if you've experienced it as a horribly painful thing to talk about, or whether it's actually made pretty much common sense. And I hopefully it has made a lot of sense, because it doesn't have to be a hugely academic thing from the perspective of the person who's governing. They don't have to become experts in philosophy, but they do have to be as cognizant of the importance of reality and of rationality and the purpose of a human being's life, as they are of such things as defending life, liberty, and property at the political level. So a lot of people will say that liberals and conservatives differ strictly on political grounds. Well, they're political parties. They're making the same mistake as the libertarians, okay? That the only way we differ is according to our, the policies we hold. What that overlooks is, why do they have the policies they hold? Well, they have those policies because they think they're the right ones to have. And as soon as you ask, is this the right one to have, you're into the field of ethics. Should we or should we not have this policy? So clearly there's an ethical difference between the conservatives and the liberals. But where does that ethical difference come from? Clearly comes from the next stage down, which is?
I disagree with clearly. There's a difference between the liberals and conservatives.
Last night. Well, in terms of what they end up saying should happen, I'll give you some leeway on that, but I'll even that I'll challenge you on. But anyway, if ethically they are different, what does that imply?
That their epistemology and metaphysics are different.
Correct. Has to be, right? Because it's only one way. The metaphysics dictates your epistemology dictates your ethics, and your ethics dictates your politics. So, if your ethics are different, you know that below that, your epistemology is different. Ultimately, your view of the world is probably different too. So, what is it? And I suggest to you all here that the difference between liberals and conservatives and us is epistemology.
In terms of intrinsic, subjective, objective.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, let's get into that just a bit. So when we're talking about ethics, there's three schools of saying what is good, okay? So there are people who say, what the good book says is good, period. If it says don't, and if it says whatever it says is bad, If it says don't put cheese on your burger, you don't put cheese on your burger because it's bad. Well, is it bad in all cases for everybody? It's bad. It's intrinsically bad. It doesn't matter what you think about. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what time you're at. It doesn't matter what any of the circumstances are. It's bad because the rule says it's bad. It just is that way. Your brain has got nothing to do with it. Whether you're alive or dead, who you are, makes no difference. Bad is bad, and that's that. Well, that's called, when something's bad in and of itself, that's called intrinsicism. That's the intrinsic school of thought about what is value and what is not valuable. Now, there's this other school of thought called the subjective school, or the subjectivist school. And it says something's of value if you think it's of value to you.
A subject.
Yeah, this is subjective. What did I say, subjective?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Whether or not, in reality, it's right or wrong, okay? If it's right or wrong because you think it's right or wrong, then it is right or wrong. In other words, how you feel or what you think, regardless of the facts of reality, is right. Well, that's right. That really is right. And what you feel is wrong is wrong. As a matter of fact, it is wrong for you. And so you could have two people disagreeing about whether or not it's right or wrong to shoot person X, and person Y says, well, I feel it is right to shoot person X, and the other person Z says, I feel it is wrong to shoot person X. The two of them can turn to one another if they're subjectivists and say, well, what's right for you is right for you, what's right for me is right for me. Let's agree to disagree. You shoot him and I'll walk away. You know, the subjectivist school doesn't have any respect for the facts of reality. It's simply whimsical. Whatever you believe is good, whatever you believe is evil, and we can all agree to disagree. And that's it. The intrinsicist says, this is right and I don't care who you are, this is wrong and I don't care who you are, and that's that. Well, who do these two schools kind of sound like, right? Stephen Harper got on YouTube back in, I think it was April, and the number one question and the number two and the number three and the number four and the number 10 question put to him on YouTube was basically, shouldn't you legalize pot? So, you know, it's a younger audience. That was the issue that was most of them were interested in hearing an answer on. And he pretended he was surprised.
They combined them all into one question. It was like the top 5.
Yeah. And so he goes, oh, really? I am surprised to learn that that's the top question. You know, he wasn't surprised at all. I mean, if he had any assistants working for him at all, he would have been able to read the poll questions like everybody else. Yeah. So anyway, he knew it was coming, and he says, you know, people, you know, I know there are these people who say if you just made it legal, then everything will be okay, and you got the money. He says, but that's not, you know, drugs aren't bad because they're illegal. Drugs are illegal because they're bad. Well, wait a minute. Haven't we all tried a drug or another? I'm talking any kind of drug. Aspirin. Some of us have had stronger stuff. Have we tried alcohol? Have we tried caffeine? Have we tried tobacco? Have we tried, or nicotine? Have we tried THC and etc.? These things demonstrably have helped many people. The guy who's going to get his leg chopped off on the field of battle in the Civil War, you want to bet that bottle of whiskey is good for him.
Darn right.
Darn right, because it's a painkiller, and he needs a painkiller while the doctor's sawing off his leg. In that circumstance, that alcohol is what he needs. It's the best thing he's got available to make this not something that's going to kill him from the shock or the pain. There's a context for every decision about right and wrong. Stephen Harper doesn't think so. Stephen Harper thinks drugs are bad, and that's that. He's an intrinsicist, and he's prepared to make laws on the basis of what he believes is right and wrong intrinsically. He's a conservative, and he doesn't really differ from all the other conservatives we've seen. Generally speaking, the conservatives are the intrinsicists, the people who believe that right is right for everybody, that wrong is wrong for everybody. How they come to that belief is a matter of epistemology.
Religion.
Usually, you're right. Now let's turn to the liberals. They're a real strange bunch. We'll take pot as an example. We had a liberal government who said, well, let's bring in decriminalization. And some of them even said, well, maybe we'll even do full legalization, get rid of the prohibition altogether. We'll wait and see. The Senate had suggested legalization. I hate that word, but getting rid of prohibition. And so there was a second report that was going to be done by the House of Commons, and we'll see whether or not the House of Commons agrees with the Senate. They're a wishy-washy bunch, but ultimately we got the sense that what they did was whatever the polls told them to do.
Consensus.
Right? Consensus. They didn't believe that pot is good or pot is bad. They had no sense of any way of knowing. Instead, they said, since we have no way of knowing whether drugs are good or drugs are bad, whether cannabis is good or cannabis is bad, what are we going to do? We're going to turn to consensus. We're going to say, what do people want? What do the greatest number of people want? And they came up with the general will, or the will of the greatest number was this middle of the road. They called it middle of the road anyway. We'll fine you instead of imprisoning you, which they called decriminalization. Oh, and I guess you got no criminal record as a result of that too. And that was a perfect example, I think, of subjectivism. They weren't saying drugs are bad or drugs are good. They had no decision about that. They just said, we're going to do this because, well, we all disagree on whether drugs are good or bad, because we all have our own subjective opinions, and none of us is right and none of us is wrong. So let's just come up with something that we can all live with, and we'll decide upon that by vote. That's a subjectivist. Largely speaking, then, the liberals are subjectivists. The conservatives are intrinsicists, and we see that right across the board, especially, though, with respect to questions of liberty as opposed to questions of property. Now, a few years ago, we were all sitting around a table, and maybe it was just Bob and I don't recall now. But I said, it's really frustrating. The title of the party is Freedom Party. The name of the party is Freedom Party. What does that make me? I mean, a big C conservative party member is called a conservative.
A freedomarian.
Yeah. and a liberal is called a liberal, right? What is a freedom party? Like, what's that adjective?
Even libertarians have a...
Even libertarians have libertarian, right?
Aryan after name.
Aryan.
And whatever.
Yeah.
Aryan.
And, a lot of the time, the Freedom Party guys get called libertarian, but there was this growing sense that that's a bad idea because the importance of metaphysics and epistemology, we don't want to be saying, yeah, I'm libertarian.
And occasionally fiscal conservative or classic liberal.
Classic
so we have
liberal,
all the
fiscal
labels
conservative.
applied on us.
And none of those is anywhere near as convenient as conservative, liberal, libertarian.
How about
Moreover.
Very true.
How about a Freemadian?
Well, you could be, right?
Say freedom.
But there was a
Like
few-
Tory or grit.
It's neologism.
There was a few things that we...
Something like that.
There, well, there was a few things you can observe about it. One, conservative and liberal aren't really nouns. No one is really a liberal or a conservative any more than they're a red or a green or a fast or a on. Okay?
It's an adjective.
It's an adjective. But when you use an adjective enough to describe a person, it becomes used as a noun.
Proper noun, yeah.
Yeah. So I call you a fast person, a fast person, a fast person, a fast person. Eventually I get rid of fast. I call you a fast person rather. I just call you, he's a fast. He's a fast. He's a fast.
Yeah.
We all know it means a person who is fast, but we just say he's a fast. It's short formed. And that's what has happened with conservative and liberal, or for that matter, libertarian, although much more consciously I think they picked that one. So what do you do with freedom party? Freedom is not an adjective. Freedom is a noun, right? So we said, oh, well, okay, then what's the adjective for freedom? Free. Well, shit, I'm not free. I don't know about you. So we can't exactly call ourselves free or freeze. That's even worse. What are we, Mr. Freeze? So what are we? Well, the answer is, and it's connected with this other discussion we're having about the intrinsicists and the subjectivists. Freedom Party people are not intrinsicists. They're not subjectivists.
Rationalists?
Well, they're rational, but they're objective. In other words, they don't think that there's this right in all circumstances at all times for everyone, or wrong, and they're not intrinsic. They don't have an intrinsic view of good and evil or
Yeah,
right and
I
wrong.
would suggest that we be called objectivists.
Nope.
Okay.
And I'll explain that too. Subjectivists, we're not subjectivists because we don't believe that, well, hey, Forbes over here, he's okay with prostitutes, but me, I'm going to hang him high. But we're all Freedom Party people. No, that's not how Freedom Party people are. We pretty much agree on the issues. There's something that we all agree on that's not at all subjectivist. And we aren't across the board, everyone must do as I say. I don't like drugs. Do we all agree that drugs are bad, folks? Yeah, okay, well, our party's going to stand on crushing the drug users. No, we're not like that. What is it that we look at? Well, we look at the facts of reality as determined by reason, and we extrapolate principles from that based on what the nature of a human being is. And we decide that every person needs to be defended from every other person from having their life, their liberty, their property taken away. That's the principle based on reality that we govern ourselves on. It's objective because it's based on the facts of reality and it's identified by reason. A person might be in a circumstance where taking a drug is good, and in another circumstance where taking a drug is bad. Alcohol might be fine when you're sitting up in your hotel room or on your way to the hotel room, having just had a party downstairs. But if you have to drive across town, don't drink alcohol because you're probably going to kill yourself and others. It might be very good if you're walking up the stairs or taking the elevator. It might be very bad if you're intending to operate a motor vehicle. An objectivist, or an objective person rather, even if you're not an objectivist, can see that is the case. If someone were to ask me these days, not what is Paul McKeever, I'm not an objective, I would say I'm an objectivist, but not everybody is, and not every member of Freedom Party is. But I think what every member of Freedom Party is a person who says that government's laws should be based on the facts of reality, that government should be using only rational means to determine what those facts are, and that government should keep in mind at all times what they're governing, that is human beings, happiness pursuers. So we are all agreeing in an objective means for governing. If I'm asked, what am I, conservative, liberal, as a Freedom Party person, I say, I'm objective. Eventually, people might just start saying, he's an objective. He's a conservative, he's a liberal, he's an objective. For now, that sounds too clumsy. It's better just to say, I'm objective.
It crosses another line too. It doesn't preclude anyone from another group from calling themselves objective to the extent they are. Some libertarians who call themselves libertarian may well be objective, but don't really know it.
Right.
And even conservatives and liberals to a degree, right?
Right.
And they've just attached themselves to those movements because from their point of view, that's what, or their issue or whatever it is, that's where they're going to get what they want.
But, so the point is that common thread, the thing that makes Freedom Party not liberal and not conservative, is that way that we would govern. We'd recognize reality as determined by reason for the purposes of making sure that everybody can pursue their own happiness. And that makes us objective. There are only 3 parties in this world. The party that governs in accordance with intrinsicist right and wrong, the party that governs in accordance with subjectivist right and wrong, and the party that governs in accordance with objective right and wrong. And that's because there's only 3 theories possible for knowing what you should do and what you shouldn't do, for knowing what a government should do and what a government shouldn't do, for knowing when a law should be made and knowing when a law should not be made. There's only 3 ways of coming up with that answer.
I would agree with that. However,
yes.
Explain for me, first of all, it's so easy for a conservative or liberal to cross the floor.
Yes.
And they have done back and forth all the time. So how would you explain the fact that, like I said last night, doesn't matter whether it's a liberal or conservative, they're all moving towards the same goal, which is totalitarian socialism.
Yes.
So the intrinsicism and the subjectivism all lead to one direction.
Yes.
Objectivism leads in the opposite direction.
Because only objective government is consistent with the facts of reality. The other 2 disregard reality. Or the mind.
They're common in that sense.
They're common in that sense. They fail to integrate the mind with reality, reason with reality.
So there is no clear distinction then between the conservative and the liberal, whether it's intrinsic or subjective, they're both evading reality.
Correct. And that's the essence of it.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
I agree.
And one, evading reality takes you to slavery and oppression, and living consistently and governing consistently with the facts of reality helps you anyway. There's no guarantee, but at least takes government in the direction of ensuring freedom.
Mm-hmm. And you also can look at one leads to a theocracy in the sense of, if you're an intrinsicist, it'll lead to a theocracy, a dictatorship of a religious sort, whereas the subjectivism will lead to a secular
Majority rule.
Yeah, a majority rule where some power vacuum, somebody will come in to basically lead the masses.
Right.
You know, the same way Rousseau used the general will as a
Oh.
for.
That's horrifying. If you've ever read The Social Contract, man, it sounds like, social contract. So contracts sound good. If you read it, it's like a demon's handbook. It's really horrible.
Yeah.
I remember being taught that in high school at the same time as our teacher pointed out how evil Ayn Rand was.
As if those two were
Kid you
the
not, I
same.
still remember it too. I never knew who Ayn Rand was at the time. She wrote a book called The Virtue of Selfishness. There you go, that's it, forget it.
So what's the future hold for these freedom schools?
Well, it holds whatever. I think I mean, has anybody enjoyed it today?
Yes.
Yeah.
Was it a good idea to be here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And did it give you a better idea of A, what freedom is, and B, what freedom party's about?
I've learned
Okay.
something too.
Every little bit.
I learn something new every meeting I go to, and I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm always amazed how freedom is a never-ending discovery.
I think we've come to the end of our
Thank you,
so
Paul.
class dismissed, as it were.
Yeah.